Hey you guys, Dev here at WeBuyHouses.com. Welcome to the Cash Offer Masterclass. It's episode number 102, and today we're looking at this beauty right here. You may notice it's got some parts missing. This one right here. We're going to answer the question today, do investors want to buy a partially constructed property, a partially built house from obviously probably another investor that came in here, started the project, ran out of money, and then it sat there for a while, and now they're trying to sell this property to me and you. So let's go see, what is it going to take, and would we even want what we see here? I think that's a big question. So in addition to asking the question about do we want to buy a partially built property, today we're also going to use ChatGPT to estimate the cost of finishing this property right here. And I think that's going to be pretty fascinating. Well, I know because I did it already, and I'm going to show you what it came up with, and it's pretty good. I think it's kind of scary good if you really, if you want to be concerned about AI, you might say AI is a pretty good real estate investor. All right, so here's the property. It came to us from Fazio Real Estate Solutions. It's a San Antonio ground up rehab, and I think that's the answer right there. It's just probably ground up. Like, you might want to ignore what you're seeing there. It could be of very little value. They're saying the ARV on this property is $250, and they want to sell that partially built property for $69,500. Of course, all the big five say do your due diligence because most of those things are not there. We're going to have to put them in. And you can see some pictures here, and we see Jade Vaughn there at Fazio. Again, we don't make a penny if you buy this property from Fazio. We just use their emails for educational purposes, and they're always finding interesting deals for us to look at. If you do have any interest in this one or really in any of their properties, just reach out to Jade Vaughn at 214-646-9646. Thank you, Fazio, for bringing us such a great victim today for this show. So basically what we're going to do with this one is, well, first I want to show you where it is. It's in San Antonio. It's near the center of the city, inside the 410 loop. It's in a pretty old area. And when we go and we look around the street, what we're going to see is, about look like catty-cornered. I think catty-cornered is a word we use here in Texas. I don't know if it's a real word. But over there we see a boarded up house. This one directly across the street might be the world's tiniest house with the world's largest carport. I don't know if that makes sense, but you get what I'm saying. But as I drive around this street, guys, like, here's a project going on. Somebody's cleaned that one up. But as you drive around the street, I just don't see a lot of what I think are $250,000 houses. Remember, the Fazio said ARV 250. And so what I began to do before we jump into the ChatGPT and all the numbers and all that stuff is, of course I went and I looked at Zillow to see what it had, and it said 50,000. So I'm assuming that's just the lot. Although it does have some information here about what I believe was the prior house. So it could be the value of the prior house. Realtor had nothing on this address, but if you look at this chart, it shows it could be worth around $80,000. And again, I think that might be associated with, 3278. So they're associating it with a house, and I don't think that's the house here. I'll show you. I found the house that was there. But Realtor I thought was pretty good because it had a number of these photos. I think these might be most of what we have from the wholesaler as well. But it's hard to miss on this one that there's some curvy wood going on. And usually you don't want your wood to be curvy. You want it to be straight. And so that's definitely an issue as we look at this build. Redfin, most optimistic at 110. And they are, again, assuming it's got that original 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 780 square foot home. at 142 a square foot, which is, again, I think pretty high for that neighborhood. Well, here's something that I did just to try to get a feel, because we want to go into our model and we put in the address and square footage and all that stuff, and we try to figure out what it's worth, or we try to figure out what the ARV would be, and then do the cost estimate for the repairs, and then we determine our cash value. And so what I wanted to do, since there's not a house here, is just look around a little bit. And so there's our subject property over there to the far left. You can see the wood framing there. Here's a little one next door. It was kind of small. I think it was like, I don't know, 120 or something like that. I went over to this one right here, which is 2 doors over, 1226. And the reason I thought this might be a good comp to look at is it's 1,500 square feet. According to Zillow, looks very small, and 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 1,500. But anyway, according to Zillow, that's what it is, and it's worth 134 on their Zestimate. And so I've made an assumption that we're building a house that's around 1,300 square feet from that partial build that we see right there. So, all right, so what do we do? Well, I go to my model and I basically just put in 135 as kind of my ARV. I'm actually going to increase it to 110 a square foot, which would take it to 143, a little bit higher, because it would be a mostly new build. And so I think that might be more valuable than kind of one of the houses that sat there for 30, 40 years or whatever next door. And so I'm giving it what I believe is a pretty ambitious ARV at 143,000. I do not think there's any way we could possibly get to a 250 ARV on that street. You saw as we went and looked around on the street, man, tiny houses and not much going on. Some of them boarded up. So yeah, it's not going to be that desirable. I don't know where the 250 comes from. So in our model, we're going to say max value on this house is 143. We've got a huge problem. And we'll look at the cost to rebuild, and that's really where the huge problem comes in, because if a house was worth 143 done ARV, we could pay 100,000 for it total. They want 69,500 for the lot, and that would leave us 30,000 to build. And so you're kind of seeing my the answer to my homework here. But I just wanted to show you what we did over here at ChatGPT, which was pretty cool, because you're just looking at this thing going, what in the world do I do with this? This partially built house on a street of small, inexpensive homes. It's just going to be hard to really do anything there. So I went over to ChatGPT, and this is kind of what I wanted to show you guys that I think is really cool. Can I make that big? I can. Yeah. Getting a little bit in the way here. But here's what I want to show you. I uploaded 3 of the pictures, and on one of them I even pointed to the bent board right there. But I uploaded that one right there so ChatGPT could see the whole structure, as well as this big cracked piece of concrete in front of it. And then it could see side view. And I think what I'm seeing here is all kinds of bending and curving and warping in these boards. It doesn't seem as much obvious in the vertical beams, but the roof, those beams that make up the roof, definitely we're seeing a lot of curviness up there. And so, here's what I said based on the photos above. Excuse me. That's not what it said. What I said was finishing a partial house, check out the displayed pictures. I want 2 different scenarios. One, would you repair and finish the build, or would you remove all this and start over? What would the construction budget be for the 2 options? So that's what I asked it. And it said, based on the photos alone, I'd be very cautious trying to save this structure without a detailed engineering inspection. Very important. What does ChatGPT see? Now, this really is showing you that if you give it pictures and you tell it what you're trying to figure out, It can do a lot with those pictures. It sees that the framing appears to be weathered, that there was no roof protection, and that it was apparently open for months or even years. And that exposed it to repeated wet dry cycles and all that badness that can occur there. They see in the photos that there is a slab. It is a piece of concrete. I don't know if it's technically a slab. It might be maybe the porch or something at some point, but it has a significant crack right down the center of it. The house itself appears elevated on a pier and beam system rather than a monolithic slab. And if we go back to that picture, you can definitely see this kind of craziness of how they built the floor up in a couple of different levels off what appears to be a pier and beam construct. So basically what's it oh, and it also says watch out for code issues. The framing may have been permitted under an older code cycle, because ChatGPT is looking at that picture and saying, man, it looks pretty old. This new construction looks very old, looks very weathered. So option A, remember I asked it, should I repair and finish it? Well, it said that's only the path to take if you've brought in a structural engineer who inspects and approves the framing, the flooring system that you see there, that the city will allow permit reactivation or re-permitting. That's an interesting scenario. Let's say they don't. Less than 15 to 20% of the framing requires replacement. So you get what it's saying. Yeah, option A, a repair and finish, might be doable if what you have there is sound. And that really requires a structural engineer to go in there and do an inspection. And so likely scope, you can see what all that would entail. And then they break down a very extensive budget. And these are ranges of 10 to 30. And so it's not like we're trying to get like almost to the $10 like I do in my model. They're probably trying to get within 10,000 or so, just so you have a range. And so you can see that they're assuming a 1,200 to 1,500 square foot building. That's what they assume from looking at the photos. They estimate their costs, and they say option A is going to cost you between 120 and 250, most likely 160 to 200. So they're saying most likely 160 is your minimum for finishing the project from where it is right now, assuming everything is okay. Number two, or option B, would be to demolish and rebuild the property. This is the path that ChatGPT would take if the engineer finds that this thing is all screwed up and can't really be saved. The existing plans are unavailable, the permits are dead, the floor system has settlement, more than 25% of the framing must be replaced. We would go with option B. And so here we're going to demo the thing, 8 to 15,000, haul away another 5 to 10, site cleanup 2 to 5, engineering permits 5 to 50. So you can see we're putting a little bit of money in there just to demo it. And then you come in and build you a 1,300 square foot house there. ChatGPT is estimating 125 to 175 per square foot in the construction cost there in San Antonio. That would take us to 180 to 260, and they say most likely 200 to 230. So in our best case scenario, if we could save what we see there, ChatGPT is saying 160,000 on the construction to finish the house. And if we had to demo it, it's going to be more like 200 to clean up everything that's there and rebuild. And so, and again, ChatGPT being pretty smart about these things and a very experienced investor with many years of experience says, I would lean toward option B. And they're basically saying the savings from reusing the framing looks to only be about 20 to 40K. And, by the time you fixed it and dealt with the permitting and all the issues that could be hidden there underneath that weird looking floor. So they're saying 180 to 220. And what would they do next? What would ChatGPT recommend? Well, they'd say, go get you a structural engineer and get an inspection done. Go look at the permit history, review that with the city of San Antonio, see if you can pick things up. verify that there's some original plans for you to go by, and confirm whether you can reactivate those permits. So you can see, look, again, ChatGPT is not going to tell you exactly what the number is because it doesn't necessarily know your materials or your finish out, or any advantages you may have if you've got a construction crew already on board and all those kinds of things. But it gives us some really great examples, or estimates is the word I was looking for, of the costs and what the total cost might be, and then a pretty good idea where we might go next on this project. So what does this tell us? It tells us that this is a non-doable project. It doesn't matter if we do option A or option B. If we took option A, the minimal amount was $160,000 to finish the thing that we see there. If you add that to the $69,000 they want for the lot, we're at $229,500 just on costs. We'd have to sell the house for $300 or something like that to get a profit on this thing. This house, this street can't handle this. This project, I think, will be there 5 years from now, looking similar, maybe more bent boards, because there's no one that can go in there and pick up this thing and finish it. We can't afford to finish it. That's what ChatGPT helped us figure out today, is that this is a non-doable project. We can't afford to finish it. So that I thought was pretty interesting, guys. I didn't really spend time with their pictures. They had, I think, the same pictures that were there on Realtor, maybe a few more. But yeah, you can see a lot of debris on the lot as well that needs to be dealt with, like big pieces of concrete foundation, I think, were broken up and piled up. This thing is a POS. There's a technical term, and it's piece of something right there. That is a piece of crap. All right, guys, that's it. That's all I got for today. I hope you enjoyed this one. No fancy wrap up. I just want to say thanks to you that have joined me. I haven't been making many videos lately, but those of you that are catching the occasional episode that I do put out, thanks for that. Just been very, very busy with work, and so haven't had a lot of time to make videos. But I'm going to get back to it. We got a lot more to talk about, a lot more to do. Thanks for being a part of the Cash Offer Masterclass. If you want to get the calculator I use, go to cashoffermasterclass.com, fill out the form. I'll send you the calculator. And if you have a house like this that you don't want to finish, go to webuyhouses.com, put in the address, send it over to us. We'll take a look at it. We'll hook you up with a professional local real estate investor in your market who may give you the bad news of, we can't afford to buy that house. They would have to give us that property, right? Even if they gave us the property, we're in at 160 on construction on a house that might be worth 160. I can't even afford for them to give us this house. Oh my gosh. I'll see you guys later. Adios.